As I said before, when I kind of did a quick intro at the start, the games industry has never been bigger. It's never been more competitive either. And getting attention, especially certainly in the free-to-play space and other parts of the industry, is very hard. And obviously, it's also very expensive. And obviously, a brand partnership is clearly one of the things that you can offer as a way of giving you attention. So, to kick things off, I'd like you guys to just quickly introduce yourself and say where you work in the space, and tell me a little bit about what you think a brand can offer to a developer, or vice versa. Josh.
Hey, everyone.
Are we on?
I think it's on. No. Let me try that one. Can you hear us?
There we go. Is that on?
Hello. I'm Josh from Eastside Games. I'm CEO and co-founder there. And we work in the idle game space. And we've been, our big flagship title is Trailer Park Boys, top 100 game in 100 countries. And we pivoted from an indie studio making basically farming games back in the day, original IP, to doing IP-based games for ourselves and also publishing.
Cool.
So I'm Chris Heatherly from NBC Universal, and we have a little bit of a different model. We, of course, we have a lot of IP in the portfolio because we have, things like Bravo with Real Housewives and Vanderpump Rules. We have NBC with properties like The Office and Parks and Rec. We have the Universal Movie Studio with Fast and Furious and Jurassic World and Back to the Future and Battlestar Galactica. So we have a ton of IP and a very diverse set of IP and a diverse set of audiences. And we have very flexible business models. So we do some licensing on one side of our business, but we also publish. Increasingly, we're publishing our own mobile games. And that, to answer your question about sort of what can we bring to the party, one thing that we can bring in terms of IP is obviously an audience that is predisposed to want to play a certain IP, a certain fandom. That helps lower CPIs and get installs. But we also can bring a lot of expertise and capital to the table, especially when we work with smaller developers. User acquisition is really expensive, but I happen to work in a company, that's part of Comcast, so we have access to capital. And if there's a game that has the right KPIs, we can fund the growth of that title. So we have very close partnerships and can work in various ways with our developers.
Cool. Dave?
Dave Long with Exponential Entertainment. Let's see, I've been working with the brands for probably right around 20 years now. So with my first company was Screen Life, and we did the line of Seen It DVD games. And so we worked with the brands in a big way, worked with the licensing of probably 6 different movie studios out of the gate. With a number of their properties, and then we expanded that and ended up doing 26 different editions of Seen It and a number of other branded games. And most recently with my new company, Exponential Entertainment, we're working with the brands more on the marketing side, where we're helping them market their properties that are coming out. We've worked quite a bit with Comcast and the set-top boxes, Xfinity. Our most recent current game is Game of Thrones, so no spoilers here. I
heard
last night's episode, but so with that, with our games, you basically can see some of the marketing content for the new season, and then we have an upsell with the impulse purchase button right there to go order HBO or view the previous episodes. So they're kind of two distinct relationships, one on the marketing side, one on the licensing side.
So we've got quite a diverse experiences here, which is great. So it struck me like in the olden days, it was quite hard for developers to kind of approach brands and to get kind of brands on board. How does it work now? Is it a thing where a developer can come and go, I've got this great game, I'd love to work with the brand, or even the brands, you say are you going out looking to talk to a particular developer about working on a project? How does that relationship typically work for you, Chris?
It works both ways. So we have an internal concepting team that's always looking at our IP and kind of going through IP by IP and coming up with pitches that we go to shows like this and pitch to developers. So, sometimes it helps for us to have an idea of how the IP could apply to games, and that inspires the developer. In other cases, the developer comes to us with an idea. We're always open to that. we're talking to dozens of developers at any one time, so we're always looking for opportunities. If we spark something, we generally do a prototype to prove out the concept, and then if we all feel good about the prototype, then we'll move on to make the.
So you've got quite a lot of prototypes, and obviously things like in games, things get killed.
Yeah, that's right, and we generally pay for the prototypes, and that makes it. I never want to injure a developer. So I want to be, and I want to be in a position to say, hey, if the game's not getting where it needs to go, no harm, no foul. We all move on.
Yeah.
Protected. So that's why we do that.
How about, Josh? Obviously, you're working with Trailer Park Boys. How did that kind of come about? Do they you go to them with your existing kind of games, or did they spot you? Or?
So you're drinking at the trailer park, and then some greasy guys come over and say, "Can you make a game for us?" And it was pretty close to that, but
Excellent.
I think for independent developers, the cool thing about the market right now is there's lots of people to help you on both sides. So I worked back in brands back in the day when games still came on discs and you had to do gold masters, and we worked with IP back then, and there's a whole bunch of middle management back then. And now you don't really have that. So you have direct access to the brands, but sometimes you have direct access to the people that are actually creating the game as well. And that's really good. It can move things ahead pretty quickly. So the best thing you could do if you're looking to work for brands is talk to lots of people at shows to say you're interested in that, or come up with your own game first so you have a concept, and then later on layer a brand on top of it. Yeah. I'd say the second is the best strategy.
So you think in terms of approach, obviously come with an idea, why you would work with that brand. Dave, is that similar your experience? You've got slightly different.
When we first started CNET, obviously no one knew what CNET was, so we approached the brands, and a couple of the big brands, Warner Brothers and Disney, didn't want to participate in the first edition of the game.
Yeah.
Once we started to get some traction, it's much better when they come back to you and say, "Hey, we should do a Disney edition of this." Yeah. It changes the dynamic.
I ran Disney Toys at the time, and we came back begging to be in it. So thank you.
I'm going to segue a little. I'll come back to actually. There's something I want to talk about, but obviously it's going to vary, like all these answers are going to. But what's a deal look like typically these days? You say, Chris, that from your side it's a staggered process, and you're helping fund the development, and then after. But it felt again previously it used to be, give me some money and you can take the brand, and that was kind of thing. Is that kind of going away, or is that still a predominant model?
The traditional license model just gets tougher and tougher because the risk is so high, and the reality is that IP is 10% of the games market, and so most developers make their own IP, and the big MGs and all that, those types of big licensing deals tend to be it's really like the top 5 properties. It's Marvel, it's Star Wars, it's for us it's Jurassic World. But even a property like Fast and Furious, you'd be surprised. A lot of developers, if they want to make a Fast and Furious game, they'll go make an action-based game with cars, make it look and feel like Fast and Furious, and not license the IP. So that's where our willingness to put some skin in the game definitely helps. We do everything from straight work for hire all the way to co-investment, where the developer puts in some dollars and they get a share of the back end. Personally, I like it when we're both invested, because then everybody's got skin in the game and they're invested against the long term.
Yeah, that kind of makes sense. Do you think there's, just sticking with you for a second, Chris, do you think there's more appetite now than previously from seeing the scale of the games industry, business kind of growth? Do you think that Hollywood, on the TV studios, have more appetite now to engage with the games business?
I think it depends on what studio you're talking about, but
because Disney traditionally kind of built a games business and closed it down. I'm not saying that was you doing that, but that was their kind of model. So.
I experienced that. Look, Pokemon finally broke the video game curse this weekend.
Yeah.
Video game movie curse. It opened to around $60 million. Every comic book that's ever been written has been fully exploited, and they continue to exploit really niche stuff. Some of the biggest consumer brands in the world that haven't been exploited in film and television are video game brands. And so you see things like The Witcher. We've announced that Illumination is working on the Super Mario movie.
Cool.
So,
Sonic?
It's Sonic.
One of some debate at the moment.
Everybody's skeptical on that one. But I remember when comic book movies were bad too, right? So I think on the film side, They see it as a source of IP, and increasingly as an entertainment company, if you're not participating in the game space, you're not really participating where the users are.
Okay. I'll give Chris quite a bit, so I'm going to come to you, Josh, and David for a second. Is there, obviously, as Chris said, there's kind of, there's certain IPs that are, up there right now, the top of the shop, but, as an indie developer, it's unlikely you're going to get the end game license right to work on a thing from Marvel. So, how do you go about kind of deciding if there's a brand that's useful to you? Are kind of lower tier brands still provide a benefit to indie developers? Because there's a real sliding scale of brands. There's kind of stuff that's kind of cool but a bit older school. And is any brand a good brand or not really?
Yeah, it just really depends. Like right now, I would say brands are trying to match themselves up with the right developer. So for us, we had 30 million plus installs making Pop Farm and Bud Farm, so we made those type of games before, but a lot of brands are like, we want this brand too. Yeah. We can see how it has counterculture users. We want to be able to match those up with that. So as we're making Trailer Park Boys, our next titles are Fubar, which is a Canadian headbanger movie one, and then It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. So it's all kind of matching up for your brands and what you make. So I think for a developer, there's never been a better time if you want to look into brands to find something that matches you up, but also you have to remember it's not just the studios, it's the show creators. So you have to make sure the show creators and their vision is in line with
what they're interested in what you're doing.
I completely agree with Josh. You have to understand the brand. Do your research on the brand. Make sure you understand it. When we're working with the marketing departments of the studios, it's sitting down with them, understanding how they want to position the next season of a brand, the next iteration, the next sequel. What are they trying to do with it? How are they trying to position it? Because you can present something that just may not be in line with what they're doing, or get off topic with where they're going. And that can come back to bite you later on in the approval process. So.
There was a whole sort of period where like the celebrity brand was a thing, and obviously Glue were very successful with Kim Kardashian, and then they tried to repeat that with like various other people, and didn't really not all flops, but they didn't really get kind of close again. And is a celebrity brand still kind of a thing that's interesting, that's valuable, or does it come with different challenges maybe? I don't know. I know you're working with celebrity brands maybe, but I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it's something we're really interested in. I think the challenge with the brand is it's making IP-based games and narrative IP games that we make, is you just have to make sure that there's a story that you can tell, so that there's enough content in there as well. So that's also another big factor you have to look at. Do they have an interesting story? Is there another season? Is there enough live content for you to do live events? Because if you don't have enough content to do live events, then if you're going to do a mobile game, then that's a big hindrance right there. Yeah. So it just depends if they have enough story with their brand, if you can do it or not.
Okay.
I mean, it's tricky, right? Only one of those really worked big time, and I think one of the big problems with working with real celebrity, real life talent is they generally have a day job. Yeah. So if you look at Taylor Swift or some of the other people that did those games, Kim Kardashian, the reason that worked is because she spent a lot of time on the game. She promoted the game. That was her business. It was one of her core businesses. Yeah. Where for a lot of these other celebrities, they wanted to sign a deal and walk away. You just can't.
So it's a bit more like the old school licensing. Here's my brand. Go and
the celebrity has to lean in even more. I think where it works better for me is when we do something like say Real Housewives, where you have a brand there and talent is going to come in and out. Yeah. And, to a certain degree, that's good because it keeps the brand fresh. Yeah. So you've got the aspect of talent, but housed within kind of a container IP that can live on for decades. Okay.
Do you want to add anything? Don't have to, Dave?
Yeah, no, we've had some good success with bringing some celebrities in to promote some of our games. In particular, we did a Survivor game, and Jeff Probst mentioned us a couple times on when he was on with Regis and Kelly, or way back in the day. And we had a huge pickup there, and Jeff helped us out in a variety of different ways. He did posts for us and all sorts of different things. So just as Chris said, some of the celebrities will sign up and then they don't lean in, they don't really help out. So it's just having a good understanding up front of what their expectations are and bringing them in.
Yeah. My brand is available, and I will lean in and do anything for the money. So that's just, it's not much for following, but still. Kind of final question I'm going to put for a quick question is obviously we talked about at the start, like a number of companies obviously are making their own IP, they're creating their own brands. You've got people like kind of seriously, a relatively small company initially, but they've very much gone out with the intention to create a brand around their games. And certainly the leading games, just by virtue of kind of installs and success, are establishing their own brands. You know, I don't know whether Clash of Clans, where you consider that as a brand, I guess it is. But do you think that's a viable approach? Is there anything, should you be looking to make your own brand out of your own IP? It's very hard, I guess.
I mean, you certainly see with Fortnite that it's one of the first gaming IPs that's really had any kind of success in the consumer product space, and with toys and merchandise and that kind of stuff. I certainly think that as these gaming IPs become as big as some of the biggest movie and television IPs, that you're going to see more of that. I mean, Pokemon is the biggest franchise of all time.
Yeah. And that has gone back, as you say, the other way.
And then you're going to see television extensions, right? The Witcher's coming to Netflix, things like that. So I think increasingly these game companies are going to think about not just about the game, but think about the IP they're creating and how all of these different things feed that ecosystem.
All right. Okay, I have one last question, but we have a couple of minutes left. So does anybody have a question for our very experienced kind of brand panel here? There's a gentleman there. Do you want to... we can hear you. You can talk up. Yeah, I'm sure you can.
How you doing?
Hi. Good.
Two questions for you guys. So you were talking about Survivor. So kind of, now do you design the games into a life cycle of what you expect, the brand to be? So for example, Kim Kardashian is no longer relevant. Does the game die? Or like, how does that work out? Do you design into, let's say, this game is going to be great for 2 years and that's it? Or is it like for like ever?
Yeah.
Don't tell Kim she's not relevant.
Right.
I think she's got quite a big opinion of herself.
Exactly.
Still, so.
I mean, we looked at it that there was going to be a life cycle there with it, and so we managed around that with it. But then there's also new technologies that are coming out, what you can do with those. But we looked at it as more of a life cycle with what we were doing.
And then how do you monetize on these games?
Hey. Is it a subscription-based model, or is it like a licensing revenue? Like, how does Kim make money?
With our games, we've done all sorts of different things. We manufactured product like the DVD games, the DVD board games. We've done mobile games. We've done games that are ad-based. So it's just kind of understanding where you're launching, understanding the platform, and what's going to help you monetize the best.
Yeah, I mean, Kim Kardashian's, it was just a free-to-play, it was in-app purchases and stuff, and it was just a free-to-play mobile game.
One last question. Is, have you seen this by any chance with any lifestyle brands or fashion brands? Has anyone made any games or something that's successful within that framework?
Covet, certainly. I mean, the fashion games. There's not a big fashion game based on one fashion IP, but they license in fashion IPs into those games, and it gives people the aspiration that they can buy, these really expensive luxury goods that maybe they can't buy in the real world, but they can buy in the game. So that game is made entirely off of, real world IP.
And I think there's a few kind of home design kind of things that are getting glued and playing in that space now. So I presume within that there's opportunities for brands.
Design home.
Is that within that? Okay, sorry, I'm not a player of that one, obviously. Okay, we've got any other questions? We have? Good.
Boże Jankovic, Business Development at Nordeus. A question for Chris. I was just wondering whether there's something that you prefer working with game developers in terms of do you prefer them coming to you with already done games and then you just do a reskin with the IP, or coming with a concept, or like, is there something that...
I mean, all of the above. I mean, generally, whenever we meet a developer, we say, hey, show us your games. And we look at what they have, because if they have an existing engine that they built, it always, they have expertise, they have some learnings, and it makes it easier. The thing about reskins is that it sounds easy, but it never winds up being as easy, because once the IP gets involved, that influences the game mechanics, and so there is a degree of change that's going to happen. But certainly it helps us to understand what the developer is good at. But yeah, we always have the developer submit, even if they've done an existing game, submit a proposal and kind of talk to us about, okay, you have this expertise in this one area, how does it apply to this IP?
Okay,
Cool. Okay, I have one final question, and then we'll wrap up. So just to round up, could you maybe offer like a piece of advice, either, you know, thing to do or thing not to do? Kind of what's the gold standard of kind of working with brands you've got to really think about, and what's you know, maybe, I don't have to shame someone, but I'm very happy if you do. A bad example of how, you know, a brand in the game really hasn't kind of meshed well because they've done something stupid.
I'm not starting on this one.
Go on, Dave. You can go good. You can go positive. It's fine. It doesn't have to be.
I would just suggest coordinating with the licensor and the legal department of the licensor to make sure that there's no hiccups as you get further down the line. A key example is making sure, like if you're using music from the brand and the show, making sure that's cleared for use, and just make sure you don't bring in the legal department kind of, you know, at the last step of development here, and you get sideswiped for something that you were unaware of. But yeah, we've tripped up a couple spots.
Check the legals first. That's good.
Yeah, which is.
How big should Mickey Mouse be?
I mean, my advice would be don't do an IP game if you're not a fan.
Yeah.
You know, because the best games are going to come out of some legitimate passion and knowledge of the property. You know, the other thing we talk about is whether the concept is in the bullseye for the IP or not.
Yeah.
You know, I could make a million different Star Wars games, but if those Star Wars games are not about, you know, Jedi battling or space battles or something like that, it's not really what the fans expect. And so a lot of, you know, the success in IP-based games is delivering on the core aspiration and fantasy for that property. And so I would focus on, I'll always ask myself, you know, what is the core thing that people, you know, when they watch the show or this movie, what do they want to do? And that's what the game should be about, as opposed to, I have a mechanic that makes money, let me slap this IP on that. That won't work.
That's my Star Wars SimCity game gone then. That's a shame. That's quite promising. But
Yeah, I would say you really got to think about what your live event strategy is going to be, how you're going to handle live ops. You can't just tack that on later. You want to make sure that you're like that from the beginning to really capture, like, a lot of developers think just having an IP just means it solves everything. Means you're going to get featured, means you're going to get free installs, life's great, but you have even more complications. You have to really figure out that everything is in sync with the brand. You're in sync with stuff in the real world, and then you also want to make sure that those live events that are going to be monetizing are adding value to the users. You got to think of live IP game. You have to think of live ops IP games as just more content in the universe. So that's how we see it at Eastside Games. So people are watching Game of Thrones, they're going to play the game, they're getting some more out of the game that then they could feed back into fan sites, then they could go back in. So it's that whole circle of entertainment, and you have to be really in sync with that. So you really have to make sure, if you're a big or small studio, that you have the right communication channels to get that across.
Game of Thrones coffee manager is the one we're going for. But all right, can I have a round of applause, please, for my awesome panel? Thank you very much.